Hello everyone, Tina here. I hope your day is going wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I want to create a project for Papertrey Ink, and it's going to be a masculine card. Well, it can be a masculine card. It's actually an encouragement card, but if you switch out the sentiment, I think it'd make a great masculine card. So the options there. But today we are going to be using the Captivating Cattails. This is a two-piece stamp set. It has beautiful cattails. I am partial to these because I like the organic kind of look of them. There is a coordinating die set I'll be using to cut out the cattails, and then I'm also going to be using the Elegant Edges leaf die set. This is a two-piece die set that will cut out the border if you want it to, but it also cut out some detail leaves in your background. I'm going to be using this. Both of these are part of the brand new release. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, I'll leave a link down below in the description area. It's pretty nice. I would call it, for the most part, masculine theme. So we all need masculine cards, and so I think you will love this release. I'm going to start by doing a little bit of stamping, but before I stamp, I do want to do a little bit of die cutting. I find it easier to die cut first and then add my images to my stamping positioner. Let's grab some white cardstock. We're just going to die cut 2 in my panel, and I'm kind of centering them. This way I can line them up, but I'm actually going to keep this cardstock, the negative piece, and put it in my packaging. This way it's easy for me to just die cut these out and then insert it. You'll see what I mean in a minute. We're going to be using the large cattails here, and then there is an accent piece, and we'll be using this one to die cut. There's a smaller scale, which is really nice also. But let's run this through the die cut machine. Okay, I ran my cattail dies through my die cut machine. This is actually flipped backwards. I want to add a little bit of low-tack tape behind the back. This is going to help me be able to remove it. And I am going to use my really super thin Post-it note tape. I'm going to use this up. When I bought this, I didn't realize how thin it was, but it works really great for die cutting. Small areas anyway. So I have my low-tack tape on the reverse side to keep those pieces in, but they'll be easy to remove. And then I'm also going to take my tape runner, and I like to add adhesive on the areas, not the cattails, but the areas around my panel. This way, my panel will stay in my MISTI, but my die cuts can be removed. I'm going to grab my stamping positioner, and we'll go ahead and place our panel inside of here. And it's okay if some of the pieces are fell out. I'm not too worried about that. But I'm going to grab my image. Let's remove it. And then we could add this. It should perfectly fit inside. Let's do the other one too. Kind of how it creates a little valley for your dies to set in, and that way you're more apt to get it more perfectly positioned. So once they're in there, I'm going to pick up my images with my MISTI lid, and then we can go ahead and put these back in their home. Okay, now we're going to use some inks. I picked some greens and some greens, browns, and blues. But for my cattails, we're just going to use greens. I'm going to start off with my Simply Chartreuse. And I'm going to turn my MISTI sideways and zoom in a little bit, because these are really pretty. So Simply Chartreuse is first. It's like a light green. And I'm going to go over my images here. Ink this up. Now once we have our lighter green, I'm going to take my ripe avocado, and I'm going to add a little bit of a gradient to the very bottom of my cattails. And I want to make sure that it's not a straight line. I want it to kind of fade up. So heavy on the bottom and then kind of fade up. You can see there. And then I want to stamp it on my bottom. And I love this look. Okay, that is our... Now that our leaves are done, I think I want to darken up the bottom of my leaves a little bit more. I think I'm going to go in with my classic craft. I want to have a little bit more darker on the bottom. So this is classic craft. I'm going to add a little brown. We'll see what this does. Oh yes, and I'm happy with this. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove these. And then what we can do is add our cattails. Cattails are 2 pieces, so I guess this is layering. So cattails, for my first layer of cattails, there's 2 layers to the cattails. There's the base layer, and then you have the fuzzies. We're going to add classic craft over our cattails, and we'll stamp these. I'm going to stamp them a couple times. I love how this has turned out. Isn't that so pretty? Okay, now we're going to go ahead and remove our base cattail. I'm going to take our decorative layer. For my fuzzy layer, we'll call it, for my detail layer, we are going to go ahead and bring in dark chocolate, and we'll lightly go over these. And then we'll stamp right on top of that classic craft. And oh my goodness, I just love the detail that this gives. I hope my camera's not blurry. But that is so pretty. So those are my images. We're all done with our stamping. It's really easy to stamp. And again, if you wanted to create multiples, you could just remove your die, replace it with a new one, and just repeat the process. I think that's the beauty of these layering and buildable stamps. Okay, let's put this back. I'm going to start with some white cardstock, and then I'm going to use the outline first, line it up at the very top of my panel. My panel is an A2 size panel, which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. I'm going to tape this down. Making sure it's centered. And it's just a little bit from the top, you can see here. And I'll run this through my die cut machine. Okay, once we have our panel cut, I'm going to go ahead and take my detail layer. I'm going to layer it right over, centering it. It's going to leave, there's going to be a little bit of a white edge around it. And then I'm going to go ahead and tape this down and run this through. After I ran this through my die cut machine, you can just see how beautiful this is. I just think this is, and to me, I look at this and see kind of a masculine flourish. So I am happy with this. In our stamp set, there is a little water area, or it could be dirt, whatever you prefer. There's a smaller one too for the smaller scale cattails, but I'm going to use the larger one. And my stamped images, let me punch out these. I love that they have that detail. You can see here. This I'm going to put off to the side a little bit, but I want to stamp my little water area right underneath it. So I'll take this, And I guess it doesn't matter which way you go, but I want to put this in the center. Once I'm happy with my placement, we're going to bring back our stamping positioner. We'll place this in here. I have some adhesive on my mat, so I'm just going to tack it down. I can actually use my magnet up here. Okay, now I'm going to pick it up with the lid of my MISTI. I'm going to go over my little water area with Spring Rain. I'm going to stamp this a few times. And after I have that first layer done, I'm not even going to wipe it off. I'm going to go in with Blueberry Sky. And I'm going to go around the top edge here, which means I'm going to go around the top edge of the stamp, adding a little bit of a dark gradient to that top edge. And you can see there. Stamp it one more time. Now after we have our darker blue, again, which is Blueberry Sky, I'm going to clean off I cleaned off my stamp, and now I wanted a little bit of brown on the bottom. Actually, I take that back. Let's put a little bit of green. So I'm going to take my ripe avocado ink, and I'm going to go around the bottom edge this time. Kind of create a little mossy look. And I don't want a harsh line. Since these are cubed, you want to make sure that you don't have a harsh line. If you do, you could use a sponge dauber and just tap off the excess. But I think this is going to work great. And I'm liking the way this looks so far. So I'm going to bring in some Spring Rain cardstock. This is the full panel. I don't think I'm going to need a full panel. So I'm going to cut this in half. Not quite in half, but close enough. And then we're going to do a little bit of ink blending. And I'm going to use my blending brushes. I wanted some color on the top here. So I'm going to use my Blueberry Sky. Let's get this over. Just do a little tapping. And I want to add some blue on the edges. And I want to kind of fade out, but I want it to be really bold along the top. Once we have our gradient here, I'm going to go ahead and take my dark chocolate ink. Let's scoot over so you can see. And with dark chocolate, I'm going to go around the edges. Our panel blended. Kind of looks like a night sky. I'm going to use an acrylic block. I'm going to add a little bit of ink to my acrylic block, and I'm going to be using my Blueberry Sky. I'm going to add a little water to it. Since these are dye-based inks, you could actually watercolor with these. I'm going to add a little water to it, and then I'm going to do a little splattering with the blue. Just a little bit. Okay, and now I'm going to do the same thing with my dark chocolate ink. Actually I could probably pick up the color here. Let's try that. Add a little water. Yeah, it works out good. Let's add some dark chocolate drops. This should dry pretty quick, but it does create a really fun look. So I'm going to put this aside and clean up my area. I think my panel's pretty dry, and I love how this looks. I just think it looks super neat. We're going to flip this around. I'm going to use my tape runner, and we're going to add this to the very top of an A2 size card front. And then next we're going to take our decorative panel. Before we adhere this, I do want to position my cattails where I want them, and then we are going to stamp our sentiment. I think this is a good spot for it because it gives me a little bit of room for my sentiment. I'm going to take some classic craft cardstock, and in the stamp set, the Captivating Cattails, there are a few sentiments which are really pretty. You have thankful for you, thinking of you, in by your side, and then you have the always that's in the block letter. So you can add always by your side, always thinking of you, and thankful for you always. I think it was just so encouraging. I'm going to take the always and ink this up with my dark chocolate ink. And I'm going to stamp this on a 1/2 inch strip of classic craft cardstock. Wonderful. I didn't stamp all the way to the left because I want to tuck this underneath, maybe. Maybe I want to put it on top. We'll see. I'm going to trim this. Let's fishtail the end. Let's ink up by your side. And then I'm going to stamp this to the right of my card, just above that water area. And then I'm going to flip over. Let's go ahead and adhere this to our card base. Let's remove the release paper, and we can add this to our card base. I just love blues and browns. Then you throw in a little green and you have a little bit of contrast, which is nice. Let's add our cattails. And it's a nice way to kind of build, and it gives a little bit of dimension to go with it. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to bring in some gems here, and these are a pale green. I'm just going to add a few of them. I think that looks great. So if you wanted to switch out the sentiment, you can see it's easily a masculine card. But that's my project today for Papertrey Ink. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a fabulous rest of your week.